evening, everybody, and welcome to Encore, Illinois. My name is Beth Peterson. I'm an Associate Director of Bands here, and I'm joined by my colleague, Barry Hauser. Barry, would you say hello?
Hello, everyone. I have the opportunity of serving as the Associate Director of Bands and Director of the Marching Illini at the University of Illinois as well.
We're so excited to have our guests here today to talk about what it's like to teach the large ensemble in an urban setting. And so I'm going to start by asking them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their programs, and then we'll get right into question number one, which I'm going to ask Vince to answer first. But Vince, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you all this evening. I'm Vince Womack, Music Director at James A. Foshay Learning Center in Los Angeles, California. It's a span school, K through 12. The music program formally starts at sixth grade, although we do have some community outreach programs from USC that comes and works with our elementary students around grade 4. I teach at this point mostly students in grades 9 through 12. The first question that was posed to me is teaching in an urban setting different from the suburbs? What are the joys and challenges? Now, being that we're responding to undergraduate students who are probably in high school, a small handful of years ago, or even graduate students, the same situation mostly. I like to get an understanding of why do you want to teach? What gives you the inspiration to serve music education, right? But with that in mind, in regards to the question, in most instances, there is a big difference between teaching in an urban setting and teaching in what we might call the suburbs. Here in Los Angeles, our suburbs, we have far more single family dwellings in the suburbs than we have in the city. In the city, it looks like the Roman Empire here now, where we have like 5 and 6 and 7 story apartment buildings that just go on and on and on. And in many instances, our children live there in 2-bedroom apartments, and there are 8 or 9 people living in one apartment. And so that creates circumstances for a music teacher to deal with in regards to students practicing. In regards to, now I've taught in the suburbs. I started my career in Canoga Park outside of Los Angeles. And the suburbs, sometimes you tend to have a different kind of parental involvement in the suburbs in terms of students getting to school. Parents drop them off, they drive themselves. In the city, students are either walking or students are taking public transportation. But I would say the bigger thing in regards to the suburbs versus the city, the economic structure, in terms of the communities that you're working with. I think as a music instructor, it's very important for you to understand what the community is that you're serving, because you want to use that to maximize your philosophy. You want to look around the school area and see, well, what are the businesses that are around, that are nearby? How can you make them part of your mission in terms of you supporting your kids, them supporting you and supporting the kids? And how can you use the students in the program to maybe bring a little shine to businesses, and that can only do great things for you in the program. So those are some differences between urban areas and the suburbs. One more thing I'd like to mention, though, in terms of an urban area, in many instances, you have a lot more turnover with the administration. And that can bring about some things for you to consider as a music teacher, some things for you to have to plan ahead for and to even anticipate. I may not have a principal for more than 3 or 4 years. And how does that impact my program and my vision for the program? But in terms of the joys and challenges, we don't teach music for what it provides. We teach, I think I heard Michael Jordan say this many years ago, we teach for the joy of teaching, what we can provide. Sacrifice is is the essence of happiness. What can we give? How can we use music to make the world a better place, to make the neighborhood a better place, to make the school a better place? And I find that teaching in an urban setting, you come face to face with so many issues that are relevant to our world today. The suburbs, a little bit different. The suburbs might be a little more comfortable, and that might be what you're looking for. But teaching in an urban setting, you find a lot of the things that are happening in the world, you'll find them in your band room every day. So those are some of my thoughts in regards to that question. I could say more.
Thanks, Vince. I think we're going to find that we could talk about each of these questions for an hour, but Jeff, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you teach, and then go ahead and answer question number 1 also, please.
Yeah, of course, Dr. Peterson. So hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Ball. I'm the Director of Bands and Coordinator of Performing Arts at the Grand Street Campus High Schools, located in the Bushwick neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. I've taught at the school for 16 years, and this is my 17th year teaching. I taught for 1 year at a middle school in the Bronx before this. I say the Grand Street Campus High Schools because we're actually 3 schools located in one building. A high school called Eastern District High School was shut down in the early 1990s, and then it reopened as 3 small schools. But our music department, just like the sports department, shares between all 3 schools. Our enrollment between the 3 schools is about 1,700 students. And of that, during non-COVID times, we have 4 concert bands and 3 jazz bands meeting daily with an enrollment of about 450 students in the band program. I'm going to talk more about New York City in some of these later answers, but most of our students begin their musical training in the 9th grade because, to put it bluntly and concisely, instrumental music education isn't offered to students of color in New York City at the middle school and elementary school level. Pretty much categorically. There are some exceptions to this, my program being one of them, but this is pretty common across many cities in the Northeast of the United States. So what was the question again, Dr. Peterson? Are we on question 1?
Yes, question 1. So the difference that you perceive to be between teaching in the urban setting and the suburban setting, and then, what are your greatest joys and maybe challenges of your job?
Yeah, I'm not really an expert on teaching in the suburbs other than growing up there, but I've taught my entire career in New York City. But it's every school district's different. Every school district has its own challenges. But New York City is kind of a unique beast in that we're the largest school district in the United States with 80,000 teachers and 1.2 million students enrolled in our school district. And at the high school level, we have a school choice program that's incredibly complicated. But it basically means that if I have a class of 30 freshman students, they'll probably have come from 30 different middle schools and 30 different elementary schools, with some exceptions. So there's really no uniformity across the board, other than most of these middle schools and most of these elementary schools are not fulfilling their arts requirements in any meaningful way. So that's one of the biggest challenges. And that, as a high school band director, you think, oh, my feeder program, my feeder students, but that's not really existence. I have to be my own feeder program. Most of the time, the first time my students have ever seen a quarter note is in my class in 9th grade. So that's one major challenge you have to overcome. The other problems that come with it are issues that come generally with rampant poverty. My school was 91% on free and reduced lunch, which puts us solidly into the Title I category, and actually one of the sadly poorer high schools in the United States, compounded by the incredibly high cost of living in New York City. But the joys are the same joys of teaching music anyway. Kids are kids. Band is awesome. Kids love band. So that's one of the main things. I have a colleague who said, I think sometimes I'm glad I don't teach in the suburbs. My problems are issues with schedules, with space, and with money. Real problems to be sure, but tangible, hard problems with clear solutions. I don't really ever have to deal with a parent that's upset at me that their child wasn't placed principal in an ensemble, or that's helicoptering over their child's every move. Frankly, it's the opposite problem. Oftentimes my parents are having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to support their family. And so they don't really have time to even come to their child's band concerts. So they're different problems, but problems to be sure, but I really like teaching in the city. I think it's we all know that music can be such an impactful subject in our students' lives, and I really think teaching in an urban setting, you really get to make that impact.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And I was just, sorry, Barry, I was just going to say, I think Vince is showing off how warm it is in LA right now because he's open.
Yeah, I know, right?
Fanning himself.
It is not warm in New York or probably Illinois.
Sorry.
Well, thank you both for those great answers, and I think that's a great point too for our students to understand and realize we don't all start beginning band 5th and 6th grade, so that's a really good point. And I think that happens in a number of districts, more than what we may realize. So thank you. We're going to dig in a little deeper here now, so we're going to volley back and forth. So Jeff, if you don't mind, this time we're going to have you go first, and then Vince will have you answer second to this question. What kind of music do you program for your ensembles? And there's kind of a variety of different facets to this first question, so you can tackle this any number of ways. So music that you program for your ensembles, do you stick to traditional Western canon, or do you diversify your rep choice in some way? And then if so, how do you do that? And then can you describe possibly a typical concert program before COVID hit? And maybe that last question can actually answer some of those previous questions as well. So however you want to tackle that, there's a lot in there, we know.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep my answer short because I already see the time ticking up and I don't want to waste everybody's time too much or spend too much of it. But music selection is really, really important. And I'm glad you're pretty much after the first question going with that. It's the most important aspect of your job, I think, as an educator. It's no amount of good teaching or good instruction or good pedagogy could undo the mistake of poor repertoire selection. And so that is your curriculum. That is your subject matter, is the music you choose. There's good music and bad music in every genre. And I think it's really important to pick music that you can defend, that you can be a zealot for, and that you can advocate for as to why it's good. So that's the number one criteria I look for when I'm programming. I also think it's important to program music from a variety of cultures and a variety of historical viewpoints. It's no secret that especially the Western wind band canon is far, at least the way it's traditionally been programmed, is far too many white men. And it's really important to hear other voices in that and to program other voices. And it's not hard to do in the wind band setting. There's a ton of good music written by a ton of people from diverse backgrounds. I've also, I also serve at my school, for example, a large South Asian population. And when I was noticing there's really not a lot of that voice represented in the wind band canon, I commissioned a composer named Akash Patel of Indian heritage, who wrote a piece, a 4-movement grade 2 work based around the parameters of a band piece called Prehistoric Suite. To add that to the repertoire. And I led a consortium of mostly Queens and Brooklyn bands, but also international bands to get that piece done at a buy-in of $100 per program. So it was very affordable to other, sometimes financially strapped programs like mine. But just to go back to the initial answer, the most important thing is to program good music that you are passionate about and you think needs to be taught to your students.
Great. Yeah, that's really good, Jeff. I want to agree with you in terms of music that you're really passionate about. And I try and remember when I was a younger teacher, I would do more by thinking than more having a visceral connection and understanding of what it is that I'm teaching. You know, I knew that I was capable of rehearsing anything and helping students to learn to play anything. But I think it's important to not only sell to the students, but you need to sell it to the community in terms of what you're choosing to have the students serve. My community is probably 85% Latino and 15% African American. And when I first got to Foshay, it was such that the administration did not want me things happening after dark. So there were not many full-length concerts happening back during that time. But since then, you know, we've turned a lot of corners and we've had a lot of improvement in our community and a lot of respect for the music program. And so programming concerts for students in grades 6 through 12, we would almost always involve both the middle school program and the high school program. And so we would have your traditional concert band repertoire, but I would always try and involve something that would involve some Latino artist or some Latin piece of music. We incorporated a mariachi ensemble. I have a graduate student from USC that's well-versed in mariachi that actually teaches at Foshay right now and helps out with the mariachi. But in terms of our programming, we have a lot of Western music, and I just feel that having an understanding of how to find excellence in Western music, it really allows you to appreciate other genres of music as well. But we try and do a little bit of everything, if I can say everything. We also have an Armenian population. A spirit of embracing, a spirit of trying new things is very much alive in my school. I have a student that graduated year before last who began to compose. I got some time with him, with Christoph Beck. I don't know if you're familiar with Christoph Beck, but he composed the music for Frozen, Ant-Man, a whole bunch of other things. A great composer. He worked with a couple of my students for a couple of weeks, and they began to compose some pieces. And so we wound up even, performing one of my students' compositions as well. So we like to experience and promote everything.
Thank you, both of you. I'm going to move on to the third question, and I'll ask Vince to start this one and then Jeff to follow up. So question 3 is, can you talk about funding and resources? Are your students able to study privately, and do you have the support of parent and guardian groups?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really, really important question, especially when you are looking to grow a program and you're looking to hopefully be better next year, whatever better means, but you're looking to be better next year than you are this year. In terms of our funding, we are a Title I school. We are a stone's throw from downtown Los Angeles. We're about 2 blocks from the University of Southern California. We have a 90-something% rate of students who fall below the poverty line. So we're not a rich school. We're not a rich neighborhood. However, I spent a lot of time applying for grants. I spent a lot of time making connections with people that want to be connected with a music program that's serving students who don't have everything for them. So it was my responsibility to put a face on this program, to represent this program in an attractive manner so that we wouldn't suffer because of funding. We don't suffer because of funding. Money is not an issue for my program. And I think that's mostly because of what my perspective is as it relates to funding and raising money. Having said that, writing grants and being given grants, that's a job in and of itself. The Tony Bennett Foundation, Exploring the Arts. He started that program on the West Coast a handful of years ago, and I was one of the first schools that began to work with Tony's foundation. There are visits. There's a great deal of oversight with paperwork and how you're spending the funds. There's a great deal of oversight in what does the money that I give your program, how does that look excellent in your program? And I think every foundation that funds a program, they want to see what difference their donation makes. And it doesn't make a difference if it's $50 or if it's $50,000. The $50 donation is going to be as interested in seeing results as the $50,000 donation. So funding obviously is very important. And for a music director, that's got to be paramount in terms of what your responsibility is. But having a vision for how you want to use money is very important. And sometimes the scariest moment that you'll have is when, let's say, the principal calls you and says, look, I've got $10,000 and I need it spent in the next 5 days. I have to tell you, I'm used to that because in Los Angeles, working in LAUSD, I don't want to say mismanagement of money, but last minute money comes around all the time. You have 2 days to spend $10,000. It's important to know how you can always burn $10,000. You need to have a conscious understanding of that at all times. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my feeling about money and how to get it and having an understanding of how to spend it, right? And how to use it.
Yeah, what Vince said, that sounds like my exact job. All of that. The LA seems very similar to New York in that regard. Write grants, try to win them. One of the few advantages that you'll have is if you teach at a school that has such high poverty numbers as a school like mine and Vince's, you will win grants if you can write them competently and you can show that you're spending them well. Keep asking for money. There are advantages to urban education. There are tons of, like the New York Phil wants to partner with us. It makes them look very good.
Yes.
Just to echo on to that, always have your wish list ready and show your worth to your principal. Don't come in when you get a job teaching in a city and demand what it is. Have a 10-year plan ready to go. I knew I wanted my band program to look like what it does now when I got hired for a general music position at the school, and I was willing to fight and to build it. Show your worth to your principal by doing a little after school band on your own time. They'll think it's great. Talk about how to move it to during the school day. And your principals in urban schools are incredibly powerful. That's where my funding comes from too. I also never want for funding. At 1 year, I was given $130,000 to spend as my budget, just from the school pre-grants. I at one point was hosting our area All-State Festival at the school, and I noticed my principal walking out of the building. And I brought him down. I showed him what we were doing. I showed him all of these other kids from all of the schools, even the specialized magnet schools in the city. And my principal literally said to me in this voice, I'll do the best impersonation I can, "Mr. Ball, this is a really good band program you have here. I'm really impressed. Stop by my office Monday morning. My secretary will have another 15 grand for you." And that's going to be your source of funding. So demonstrate that you're worth funding through competency and through hard work.
Just a quick follow-up to both or either of you in terms of grant writing. Did you fail at your first grant that you asked for, or did you take a class? I mean, how do you get started on learning how to do that? Because it does sound daunting to someone who's not done it.
Vince, you can go first.
Well, let me just say that I had a team. I was very well conscientious of this could not be a me situation working at Foshay. When I left Canoga Park High School and went to USC, and then I figured, USC is costing too much money. I need to teach some more. And I just happened to find this place right next to USC called Foshay. I began to get an understanding of the neighborhood and an understanding of the families, understanding of the school, the problems that the school had. The school was rated as one of the worst schools in the entire state of California. So the collaborative aspect of who is good here, who's invested here, who loves this music program almost as much as I do. I worked with people because that also gave me confidence, because I got to tell you, being a lone wolf is lonely. And music people are really good at about going from A to Z all by themselves. We always have something to prove. It makes us feel good, man, when we can hunt the food, kill the food, clean the food, cook the food, and eat the food, when we can do it all by ourselves, right? But that doesn't always help the entity that we're trying to serve, right? And so getting help, you don't need to write the grants all yourself unless you don't have any friends of any quality, and hopefully you do. So I began by working with a team, and then, to maximize time, there are things that I felt strongly about, and I saw very clearly how I needed to represent the program, represent myself in order to be successful in gaining that grant, right? So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and you have to remember a lot of these grants that are targeting schools are written so that the application process is made so that a teacher can do it. Like it's go, as undergrads, you can even do this. Familiar yourself with Mr. Holland's Opus website. It feels like you're filling out a Google survey. Just make sure you know how to write well, which you're hopefully learning in your college classes, and you should be okay. For more complicated grants, the internet is your friend. Watch grant writing videos, take free online classes. And like Vince said, partner yourself up with people that know what they're doing. Make sure you're making those connections and finding those people, which again, one of the great advantages to teaching in an urban setting is there's people everywhere to make these connections with, and that will want to help you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you both. All right, Jeff, we're going to go back to leading off again. Again, I want to remind all of our listeners that all of these questions are coming from our students, and some really great questions. So as someone who is Black and hopes to be an educator in the future, how do I convince my students of color to participate in ensembles?
My school's demographics being what they were, I've only convinced one student who wasn't of color to be part of an ensemble ever. My school is 62% Latino and 38% African American at my school, with less than 1% Asian, less than 1% white at the school. Band is awesome. People are want to join. I don't think your recruiting process needs to be that different. I will say, in a lot of schools, I think what I see when I observe, especially my colleagues in the suburb, is that there are gateways or almost a moat and a drawbridge put up around entry to the music program. You have to make sure those entryways are gone. I'm sure we've all seen that famous bassoon presentation at a certain state conference recently, and you want to basically do the opposite of that. Your job as an educator is to make sure that every single child in your building has a path to be in your program if they want it. And you should also be trying to convince every single child in your building that they should be in your program by talking about how great band is, by showing how great band is. The other thing I'll talk about on that, but you have to really, kids are going to communicate to you with their feet. You have to make an experience that's really worth being a part of. They'll talk to their friends and they'll join because their friends are in it, because their friends are having a great time, and really see that it's something worthwhile. So that's what I would really say, that your students are going to be your best recruiters, and just make sure, that if a child, even if you are teaching it at a high school with feeder programs, for example, that if a child were to move to you from, say, my city, where there was no band at their middle school, they still have a path into your program.
Jeff, can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
I recall years ago, maybe this is what you still do in non-COVID times, but that you would just go into the cafeteria and say to students, hey, I've got an instrument, you want to get your fine arts credit by being in band.
Our main recruiting process, because again, we start ours as ninth grade students, is I just straight up I go to the lunchroom. I tell all of my band students the first week of school to just meet me in the band room instead of lunch. My older students come down with me with clipboards, and we all go around table to table, finding all the freshmen and talking about why they should sign up for this class. Oftentimes our beginner classes actually need opposite of lunch, so that they don't even need to change their schedule. And we get most, if your school has in-school suspension, they'll have what are called satellite lunches, because they have to deliver food to the kids that are in the in-school suspension room. You just get friendly with your cafeteria, have them make more of those, and have them delivered up to your band room. And then you give the kids 15 minutes at the end of the period to eat. And you'll find most students would much rather do that than just sit in the cafeteria, which can actually be a pretty stressful place when you're new to high school.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I think this is really important. And I think for me, who has taught, 30 years or so or more in a couple different places, that doesn't by any stretch give me the perspective of, I know what every situation is like. I don't know what every situation is like. And so how do you convince students of color to participate in ensembles? Well, why don't the students of color participate already? What is it that brings us to posit students of color don't want to participate and they need to be convinced? That's what you've got to get an understanding of. You have to know the fire that you're trying to impact. You have to understand the fire that you're trying to impact. That's first of all. And so after you get an understanding of what's going on, then you work out some logistics. There may be some attractive logistical things that you might be able to do, such that the music class works out beneficially for all students. And so students of color might want that. But the music program needs to feel, it needs to look accessible and attractive to all students. What is it that doesn't make it look attractive, first of all? Once you realize that, and then we can figure out, okay, how can we make this seem more inviting to students of color? What is it that I can do? What is it that I can be as the music director, as the conductor? What is it that I can do to be the type of leader that makes all people feel welcomed into this program, into these ensembles? What is it? What are some overt things that I can do in terms of maybe taking performances in the classrooms, or maybe impacting the third graders or the fourth grade students of color that are going to be fifth graders and ready to get involved in music pretty soon? Because you got to catch them while they're young. Because we all know in this world that we're living in today, man, I have a 12-year-old daughter upstairs. She's a sixth grader, but let me tell you what this girl has. On her wrist, she's got an Apple Watch. In her hand, she's got an iPhone. On her bed next to her, there's an iPad. On her desk, there is a laptop computer. She's got a flat screen television running around in that bedroom someplace. I mean, she's got something going on nonstop. How can I impact that? How can I make it seem to her that, okay, being in band, would be cool to do, as opposed to getting on TikTok and rocking out with TikTok for like 2 or 3 hours straight, right? So in terms of students of color, make it attractive for students of color. I mean, you would need to understand what that means, though. I mean, I can't tell you what is really going to make it attractive to students of color. Probably seeing more students of color involved in it. I mean, that might be the thing. I mean, if that is the problem, they don't see enough familiar faces, perhaps. And as a Black student who's looking to teach, confidence, self-confidence goes a long way, but that doesn't mean that you know everything. Don't be afraid to say, wait a minute, I didn't do the right thing here, or I need to try something different. Really own the mistakes, but really make sure that the joy that you feel in your soul for being a music teacher leads first. Make sure that shows up 5 minutes before you walk through the door. And I promise you're going to have far fewer defeats than you're going to have victories.
That's awesome. Excellent advice for all of us. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with you, Vince, on this one. This is question 5, and it's about social justice. How does it impact your teaching or your approach to music making? And I know that you both sort of talked about this a little bit, but I think even before we were recording, Vince, you had some things to say.
Yeah, well, at 50 something years old, I don't remember what I said an hour ago, but the word is social justice. The phrase is social justice. We hear social justice, especially in educational circles right now, because everyone wants to be better in that regard. And so it has impacted, it impacts everything. I mean, I think that, I think all of us have seen more Amazon trucks rolling around in neighborhoods now. And I'll guarantee you that Amazon truck is probably carrying some type of text to help someone understand our history better. Mm. I mean, I know we've all been buying books. I mean, because we feel like, wait a minute, how is it that I don't understand more about where we as a civilization in North America have come from? How is it that I don't get that? I grew up in Alabama. And oddly enough, just today, someone asked me about growing up in Alabama, and it's African American Heritage Month. And so I told them about some things that I had done. I was a part of the first integrated first grade class in my county. And in fourth grade, in my history class, I had some questions about some things written in the history book. Now, my history book, you may have heard of, it's called No Alabama. It's famous. It's famous because inside this book, it talks about things like, let's say, the Ku Klux Klan. It talks about the proud men, the proud, valiant men of the Ku Klux Klan. And it pretty much makes them seem like they are a civic organization. And so the point I want to make, though, is what we might consider to be the whitewashing of history and its part in institutionalized racism. I think all of us have been impacted by that. And the poisons of what we might call white supremacy has impacted all of us. And so the events in the last year or so have brought us to a point where we see so many people in the streets not getting along. What are the problems with these conversations? Because people have teamed up. And so the conversations aren't really people really listening to each other. In some instances, our children are trying to listen to each other, but they don't have the words to express themselves. And in many instances, the people that they're trying to express themselves to don't understand the facts of history, don't understand how we get to where we are today. So how can we have conversations about things that happened today when we don't understand how we got here? In my music classroom, history is incredibly important. And I try and connect to things that just yesterday, we got to talk about Plessy versus Ferguson and the impact that separate but equal, the impact that that had on the jazz era, the impact that had on people who were Creoles. Now, instead of them living pretty much a white existence, now they're on the bottom of the rung now. And so all of that experience that they had, the opportunities they had for private lessons, the opportunities they had to go to school and to learn music at a high level, all of that came into the whole realm of jazz and so many other African American traditions here. So social justice has had a large impact on my teaching in probably everything that I do, because I see that what I'm teaching, what's the purpose of it? What is it giving my students? Do they need to learn my lesson today so that they can be just better musicians? Let me tell you something. You throw a rock in any direction, it's going to land on somebody that plays music really, really well. Our students need more than that. They need to have an understanding of how playing music can help us live a better life and to help us to share a better life and to get along better with others. So I'm going to let that go for now. Perhaps we might need to do a little back and forth with this, but that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback onto that, I hate to be like always being like, yeah, what Vince said, but it's incredibly important. It's I'd say the impact it has on my teaching is it's huge. I mean, it's we all talk about all the time in these ed classes the importance to a child of a high level comprehensive arts education. And the fact is that in New York City especially, but in many other cities, and frankly, especially in the North, many other cities, children of color are not receiving high-level arts instruction, K to 12. That's just, and schools that are meeting the requirement are doing window dressing through moderate after-school programs, or showing film class, AKA showing the kids a movie for their arts credit. It's just not being met. And every child in this country has a right to receive high-level arts instruction from a qualified teacher. And that's something we need to make sure that we're doing. Like I can't really escape social justice in my job, and I've never really wanted to. For those of you that don't know, do you guys know what the most segregated state in terms of schools is in the United States? Yes. Anybody? No. It's New York. New York schools are the most segregated in the U.S., and that's mostly because of New York City. It is incredibly rare to find an integrated classroom in New York City. Even in schools that are integrated, gifted and talented programs siphon the money away from the rest of the students. And strangely, only the white parents and white students seem to be told about the gifted and talented programs. Again, I'll recommend to know more on this. The New York Times did a great series on this called Nice White Parents. It's a podcast that explains the whole situation. But I'm a firm believer that high qualified teachers from schools like the University of Illinois or Ithaca College where I went, or the Crane School of Music, or UCLA out where Vincent teaches, those teachers need to be instructed to go into schools in the city and be willing to fight and to build programs and to be zealots for making sure that every child has access to high-level arts instruction, that it's not something that the income of your parents or the race of your parents or your parents' birthplace determines. It should be your right as an American. And that's what we're trying to do. So I don't think it's escapable. One other comment on social justice that's important to me. So much of it is focused on, making sure that colleges program enough works by women or people of color, or that guest conductors or directors are hired that are women or people of color. That's absolutely important. But you're not going to have more composers or musicians that are women or people of color unless women or people of color are given access to arts instruction at a young age. I firmly believe that the battle is going to be won or lost in middle school or in elementary school on this, and making sure that every child in this country receives every child in this country receives high-level arts instruction at that age. And I don't think you're going to see anything other than artificial solutions and window dressing to the whitewashing of our profession until that is fixed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Jeff. And I think I was mentioning to Dr. Peterson earlier, here in Los Angeles, I don't know how many years ago, but Dudamel became our music director of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and he brought a music education philosophy from Venezuela, El Sistema. And the El Sistema program was very exciting, and it still is pretty exciting, but it required that students be involved in it at a very, very early age. And in about 4 years, the orchestra with all students was an incredible orchestra, and everybody wanted a piece of it. We ultimately played at the Super Bowl a couple years ago up in San Francisco. But if we don't make a difference with our young people, then we are really only treading water. The one thing that I will always feel in my heart is that the Pilgrims are the greatest thing ever. Because when I was young, that might be the first time when I was in school, they let me cut out stuff, they let me paint stuff. And then they told me that I'm going to get 2 days off of school because of the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were on a boat called the Mayflower and survived the Atlantic and landed on a rock. And then they met the Indians and they broke bread and they prayed with the Indians. This was in the book when I was a kid. I'll never forget that. That's the one thing that I'll never forget. We have to impact our children, or otherwise TikTok's going to win out every time.
Oh, TikTok. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. We're going to switch gears here to recruiting and retention. And I know we've kind of hinted at this in some of your previous answers, but let's focus in on this a little bit. So we'll start with Jeff again, and then Vince, if you don't mind. So talk about recruiting and retention for your large ensembles.
Yeah, so I did talk about this a bit with the whole cafeteria thing and all of that. Make sure it's awesome to be in your class, and it's awesome to be in band, and a lot of your recruiting woes will solve themselves because people talk, especially kids, and they'll talk about how great band is. Some other things. One of the weird things I've been doing, and this will lead into my answer for number 7 as well, is I've been taking a lot of student teachers. even some from the University of Illinois. And we were talking before we started recording, one of my former student teachers who's an Illinois grad now teaches at IS 93, which just so happens to be about a 10-minute train ride from my high school. And strangely, now I'm getting students from IS 93 who already know about my band and know how to play trumpet and guitar and instruments that are coming to us. So that's one strategy I've had, is making sure you don't just confine yourself to your school, but in a place even like New York, where there's hundreds of different middle schools that feed me, I'm trying to make sure that all of those schools know about my program. I take my jazz band, or our top jazz band, sorry, both our jazz band A and then our Latin jazz ensemble. We take them out and we do run out gigs. We do middle school assemblies all the time. And it's a really positive experience, just even to be like, hey, even if you don't come to our high school, maybe you join band at your school to recruit. And it's be as involved as you can. Be at every open house. Be there anytime your principal needs anything. Anytime there's a recruiting night for your school. Make friends with all the athletics coaches. I had a student who was an All-American defensive lineman who was also my principal clarinetist 2 years ago. So it's really just recruit everywhere. Retention will take care of itself if your class is awesome. I also want to read, I reached out to a couple of my colleagues who teach middle school, especially one of my colleagues who's built a program in the past 4 years at his third middle school. And he talks about in his school at Corona, which is, his school is almost entirely Latino, his population. He says in Corona, the sixth graders rotate through all 5 arts electives in the year before choosing a major for 7th and 8th grade. That 8-week period with the 6th grade class is a sales pitch. It has to be interesting and meaningful and enjoyable. If it is, they'll choose it. If it stays that way, they'll stay too. And I think that's a really good answer. Make your class interesting, make it enjoyable, make it meaningful. And then you won't have an issue with the retention.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Vince?
Yeah, what Jeff said. No, truly, there's no way around it. You have to be able to sell what you've done. I think that in terms of helping you to do a better job at being able to sell yourself, try and have a digital footprint with everything that you do. Try and have a recording of things that you do so that you can create digital products that you can use to promote. At some point, you might find yourself in some ballroom and you're the 5th person to speak, and you have to go and promote your program after some visual and performing arts program goes up and speaks about how they're going to perform some huge musical or tone poem by Franz Liszt coming up, and then it's your turn. You got to be confident in where you've been and confident in where you're going, and you have to show it. So if you got, products, from things that you've done, then that will only help you. The music's got to be great. There's no substitute for making great music, people. It's all about the music. And the students hopefully are happy being in the program, because as Jeff mentioned, the students are going to talk. Trips are always very enticing, someplace that we're going next year, or even someplace cool that we just came back from. I remember a couple of years ago, I wound up taking a group of kids to Paris, and there was a lot of media attention here in Los Angeles because, I made a couple of phone calls and had done some things, connected some dots. Next thing you know, we're all over the television, right? In the city of Los Angeles, made us ambassadors. And so because of that, a lot of parents and a lot of kids wanted to be close to that fire, right? So, make what you do as attractive as possible and make sure that people can see it.
Thank you both. I'm gonna ask the last question, and I think we'll start again with Vince, and we'll finish up with Jeff.
Make it good.
But I'm hearing retention and relevance. But I also want to just vary that a little bit, because some of the things we talk a lot about at the university is, and I think that's why we picked this topic about the large ensemble, that if students are not interested in band and they're more interested in other forms of music, rock band or jazz ensemble, how do we, are we staying relevant in concert band? So that, and you've kind of spoken to that, but I guess that's another part of the question. So relevance, the large ensemble, what advice do you have? If you have one piece of advice you could share with future teachers, I guess we'll end with that. So any of those things I just sort of said in a really not very well-formed question, please answer.
Yeah, well, I think we're all going to need advice to deal with the earlier parts of your question. You might be in a job that you thought was, the spine of it was the concert band / marching band, the traditional large ensemble. And you've been there for half a minute, and then something happens in the world, something happens in the community that changes the perspective of the neighborhood. Football isn't important anymore. Marching band isn't important anymore. God forbid. Or the feeder systems in the neighborhood or in the entire city or in the county have changed. So you're not dealing with looking at a 60-something piece concert band anymore. You're looking at something that's very, very different. Our initial response is to take that personally because we are defined by what we declared our philosophy to be of teaching music as we're leaving college. And sometimes we might be a little bit rigid in that. But, I think that, when you take a job, you're serving the community. And in some instances, it is about your perspective and the changes that you want to make. But ultimately, how can you use music to best help and serve the community that you're working in? Because we all want to change the world. I taught sixth grade for a long time, and every sixth grader that I ever had, and I always asked, how many of you guys are going to be something great in this world? Every single kid I had said, I'm going to do something great in the world. Every single one of them. And so my response at some point is, before we change the world, we need to change the room. Too many of you guys are fighting each other. Too many of you are conniving against each other. Too many things are happening. And so that brings a focus to what can we do locally before we just forget about the local aspect and look at the global aspect. What can we do here to make a difference? And so that's just something to think about. But I want to move to more of the advice part, and we can come back to the large ensemble and the changes in the world with large ensembles. But I think that there's been a lot of energy going towards us teaching and incorporating social emotional learning and helping students to understand self-awareness, helping students to really absorb self-awareness. And before you can self-manage, you have to be self-aware. If you don't know what's going on with yourself, you can't manage yourself. And consequently, you can't find empathy and compassion for others if you really don't understand what's going on with yourself. And I think that starts with us as adults, us as people who are looking to graduate and go out to get a job. Why do you want that job? I think that's really important. What is it that inspires you? Because I think inspiration is incredibly powerful and is incredibly important. Otherwise, we're living a perfunctory existence. How do we use music to truly inspire and to create change? I think that's something that young teachers need to have an understanding of. Why do you want to teach music? I mean, what is it about teaching music other than you were the best in your high school? Other than you probably won 75% of the auditions that you ever went on and you're supremely talented, how does that translate into you being a music teacher? I think these are questions that are really, really important to answer so that there can be some sustainable, not only success for you as a teacher, but sustainable success for the programs that you serve. So I'd like to begin there. And since we're running out of time, I think I'll let Jeff get a piece.
Yeah. Just to piggyback onto that again, it's really important that you ask yourself why do you want to be a music teacher? Are you just looking to get your old high school band director's job, which I'm guessing most of the students watching this, because you're at the University of Illinois, means you had a pretty comprehensive music education, means you probably came from a pretty good band program or a pretty good music program in general. I'm sure there are also some people listening who are exceptions to that, and good for you. That said, though, we don't need more people in this profession who just want to chase those top jobs. All right, top jobs in quotes. Again, like I said earlier, when I took my position, it was 4 periods a day of general music and then 1 period a day of after school band. Was the position. And Ed Lisk, who hopefully you're reading Ed Lisk's books in some of your music ed classes, but he always talked about, instead of chasing your dream band program or your dream job, why not just go somewhere and build it? And I'd like to think that's what I've done. And frankly, that's I think a more valuable way to spend your time, because it wouldn't have been there without you. It's really important that you other advice that you make yourself as high quality as you can be. Because as music teachers, we have a pretty sacred responsibility, especially at schools like mine and like Vincent's. Let's take a math teacher and a music teacher. Let's say we'll have a bad music teacher and a bad math teacher, whatever bad teacher means. So you have a bad math teacher, their kids don't learn math. That's tragic. Eventually, the teacher loses control of the classroom, principal loses faith in them, and eventually that teacher is either forced out or washes out of the profession. And that sucks. But then what does that school do? They hire another math teacher. So now it's like the bad band director. Those kids don't learn music. That's equally tragic to them not learning math. But then enrollment in the program declines and suffers. Principal loses faith in the subject. And then that teacher then loses their position or washes out of the profession, and the principal kills the program. And that subject now doesn't exist for generations of children at that school. And that's frankly what's happened at many of the schools in America's cities. Because you'll also find when you teach in a city, there will be pressure from the suburbs to poach you. I'm very glad and very proud that I've not taken some of the job offers that I've received. And like I said, social justice is really important to me. I don't think I would see myself doing that or even enjoying that job as much, because it's really rewarding. The large ensemble to me is super important because it's the most efficient way to teach the most people music. You won't reach as many people if you're coaching string quartets or if you're coaching just four kid rock bands. I'll come back to rock band in a second. It's the most efficient way to teach high quality music to. I mean, what other way can you teach 90 people at once meaningfully and effectively in a way that's deeply personal to each person there? So I think the large ensemble will always have reference because it's frankly economical and a great way to give high level arts instructions at that course. That said, you can do the large ensemble with other forms of music. At Grand Street, we offer 3 modern band classes, which have 35 to 40 students in them, playing at once, playing pop music, playing rock music, playing music that is relevant in that way. You can do that in your jazz ensembles. I mean, a jazz ensemble can play every kind of music pretty much, if it's arranged well and arranged effectively. And advice for new teachers, I mean, first of all, to want to teach in a city, come do it, please. We need you. It's totally worth it. I frankly can't think of a better way to spend a really good degree, like a degree from the University of Illinois, than building a program in a city. But you always remember what you want, the high level, that college music making experience, that Lincolnshire Posy, that Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, that Jazz at Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. Always remember that level, but don't be upset if that's not where you start. Be willing to celebrate that, getting a bronze medal when bronze is the lowest ranking, level 1 with your 12-piece concert band of beginners at festival, because that might be the first trophy your school's ever won. I have a colleague who did that, who got a silver, which is thank you for coming, basically in New York State. Bronze is if like the kids like leave in the middle of the concert. And the principal got it and cried because it was the first award the school had ever received, a school that had been, threatened with being shut down and on condemnation lists. And I'm sorry, but that's more relevant and more important and more impactful than going and conducting Lincolnshire Posy at the wealthiest suburban high school. It is. And I think that's a better way to spend your time. So don't adjust your standards, but be willing to celebrate small successes, because small success after small success leads to a great program. And leads, I also I don't judge other directors by the ranking that their top band gets at competition. I always, when I meet my colleagues at like Midwest and stuff like that, I ask them how many students are in their program. What percentage of your student population are you serving? What steps have you taken to get every child in your school access to your program? Because that to me is more important, because people say I'm a numbers guy. Yes, every single one of those numbers is a soul and a life that music can change forever. So I think celebrate, like you notice when I introduced my program, I said that there were 450 students in it. I'm much prouder of that than when my jazz band took the top ranking possible at the highest level of difficulty in my state a couple of years ago. That'll happen too, but that'll be a side effect of small victories, of making sure that everyone has access. You will get a band that can play Lincolnshire Posy if that's not your number one priority. That'll be a side effect of doing things the right way, in a philosophically sound way that incorporates social justice.
Wow. You both, I'm just so honored to know both of you, and your answers are amazing. I think every music education person in this country should watch what you all just said. So thank you very much. I just really, we both appreciate your time and your energy and your inspiration and what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. And thank you to all the students that are watching this and stuck through to the end. And like straight up, if you want to come teach in New York City, we always need good people. Make sure Dr. Peterson gives me your resume and we'll find something for you. And I'm sure Vince can do the same thing in Los Angeles. Like, we always want good people in the cities.
We need good people in the cities. Last piece of advice: go out and do as much as you can while you're still in the laboratory. Take some chances, travel, learn other languages. All these things will become your instincts once you step on the podium. Your instincts is what's going to keep you alive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Everybody stay safe. And we really appreciate it on behalf of Illinois, all your time tonight. So good to see you both.
Good to see you guys.
Good night.
Good night.